Live from the glorious beaches of the world, this is a globally acclaimed 7.2 pH transformation show. I'm Clement Stewart, your health coach and lifestyle transformation trainer. The 7.2 pH transformation show focuses on revitalizing the human body. This is done with dietary changes and whole food-based supplements. These critical changes put the body back into a disease-free alkaline state. Join us. Send us your 7.2 pH questions and future show suggestions. Email us at 7.2phshow@gmail.com.
Good. You heard that. We're all saying the same thing. Okay. I'd like to explore for a minute, if we could, the topic of juicing. Now, juicing is taught by Jay Cordish, the juice man, and juicing is taught by this person and that person, and there are many books on juicing. Most of the books on juicing are collections of juice recipes with a few pages pasted on the front about why you would juice, or who would want to juice, or what kind of juice you would ever want to have. So let's try and explore that with a little more intelligence. Doug, let me start with you, because you really come from, as you said, a hygiene background, and in the hygiene world, you really eat whole foods in general. And so what is your view on juicing in general as part of a lifestyle for therapeutic purposes when someone is coming from a very sick or ill place, and so forth?
Philosophically, I would not use juicing except in rare instances therapeutically. As a lifestyle program, I would not use juices at all with healthy people. Would I ever juice citrus and throw the pulp back in the juice and drink my citrus instead of eating it? Sure. Would I ever take some fruit and throw it in the blender and add water and drink it rather than eat it? Sure. But would I ever remove the fiber and the nutrients that are caught up in the fiber from my food in order to concentrate the dosage of the food? No, this is a whole food program that I'm recommending. I can't see refining the food, oxidizing the food before I get around to eating it, removing vital nutrients, and concentrating the sugars, concentrating the calorie count. We all know that a person can drink 10 pounds of carrots, but they can't eat more than one, or it's a rare person can eat 2 pounds of carrots. The other thing about this is when you drink juice, the nutrient intake is concentrated, but it's also consumed incredibly rapidly. If you only juiced as much vegetable matter as you would eat, so you juice 2 pounds of carrots instead of eating them, well, I've sat down and eaten 2 pounds of carrots. It takes me the better part of an hour. But when you drink it, most people don't take an hour to drink a glass of juice. They drink it, and instead of calling it juice at that point, I would call it jolt. Now, the difference, again, between the way that I look at food and the way a lot of people approach food is because of their training in the medical model, they say, oh, well, bananas, potassium, or celery, sodium. I eat bananas for bananas, and I eat celery for celery. Yes, I've done my homework, and I know the nutrients behind all of that, but I tend to eat my food for the food, not for the medicine.
So just to make sure we capture the essence of what you're saying, the issue is about separating the fiber from the rest of the food and losing the fiber.
It's partly about the fiber, but it's also about the speed of uptake. The cellulose, fibers slow sugar uptake. And if you want to help a diabetic, what you do is you add the fibers into the food. The guar gums, the pectins that are found in fruits are actually being used by medical practitioners now to treat diabetics to try to keep them off of stronger drugs. They extract the guar and the pectin from fruit and give it to the diabetics rather than telling them to consume the fruit with the guar gum and pectin in it, because the diabetics are consuming sugars that have exceptionally high, or what are called rapid uptake sugars, glucose and sucrose, as opposed to the fructose. Certain fruits are very, very high fructose fruits as opposed to glucose. which means they have a much, much slower sugar uptake to begin with. Most of those fruits are also higher in guar, gums, and pectins, which slow down the sugar uptake again. Fruits provide their own natural protection. Tell me the person that became a diabetic from eating fruit. That's not what caused it. Now, you can't just, you have to be careful. Once a person is bankrupt, you can't, they don't have the issues to spend money more. And the same thing, once a person has bankrupted themselves on their sugar metabolism, they can't just jump into it. People are sicker than we give them credit for, folks. And they're just walking around barely making it. So taking a person that we call relatively healthy, I would think all of us realize that they're exceptionally ill people. And the people that I work with that are world-class performers are also exceptionally ill people. They're just really fit, but they're very sick. And to bring them to a healthy place requires a transition.
Brian, I know at Hippocrates, juice is served every single day, and there's green juices emphasized almost exclusively or exclusively. So obviously you do use juice. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, first I'll start by saying what we agree on, because it's not much on this subject.
Well, we knew
that. Doug saying fruit juice and taking that amount of fructose, I would completely concur with. This is why you would never find us serve carrot juice, beet juice, or fruit juice. When we consume fruit juice, my family in the morning, it's 90% water and 10% juice. And this should be a golden rule for all of you, healthy, unhealthy, etc. The unhealthy may be no fruit juice. You must look at the anatomical state of affairs, and Doug just articulated this a second ago. He said that none of us are healthy, all of us are sick, and because of that, we can no longer rely, as our ancestry did, on eating just whole foods. Many members of this group live in Los Angeles, New York City, polluted areas of the world. Some of you live in the computer industry, where you're in front of a computer 8 to 10 hours a day, being zapped. And because of that, we have to do exceptional things nutritionally. And as Doug pointed out, you cannot sit down and eat 5 or 10 or 20 pounds of food, nor would I expect that. If you eat enough fruitarianism, you'll probably end up doing that a day. But by taking juices that are not sugar-based, but protein-based, mineral-based, the richest minerals you can get on the planet Earth are from the green vegetables, from the sprouts. By taking them on a daily basis, you sustain. Now, I wish I had the time and the venue to do so, because I could show you the differentials. I just did this in Toronto recently. I brought in blood profiles from numerous people and showed the differences just from consuming green drinks. So I can articulate it as clear as I can to you. We call green drinks the strong arm of the program. When I get blood tests back from guests that leave, once again to remind you, for free, for the rest of an individual's life, we interpret your blood test to help you. And I did understand that a lot of these people do not understand our program. It is not an all green and all cleansing program forever. As you improve, and if you gave us 2 years, and that's what it takes to turn around 97% of the people, 2 years, then we vary and moderate the diet. The problem in Western culture, most people will not give you 2 years. They want to do the yo-yo effect. I try this for a week, it doesn't work. I'll try that for a week, what makes me right? I like sugar, so instead of that, I'll drink gallons of fruit juice. So the bottom line is, green drinks and juices, I think, should be mandatory for everyone. I don't go anywhere in the world, except here in the last few days, that I don't drink 2 green drinks a day.
Yeah, and the only difference between what Brian said and what I said is that I encourage people to eat green vegetables and go to where the end point a little straighter. Rather than say, let's do juices first and eventually develop the vegetable habit, I say, let's just start eating green vegetables. Let's chew them up and juice them in your mouth and swallow them. And if you want to spit out the vegetable matter even, go ahead. But let's go to the end point, which is going to be eating lots of greens.
So if I understand, and David, I'm going to bring you in this in 1 second. So if I understand correctly, Brian, what you're saying is it's a matter of dosage, and that the juices are to get a super dose of minerals and other nutrients in a world where we have so many things assaulting our bodies that we're not there in an older time. And then Doug, in contrast, if I understand what you're saying, is eventually we need to get to the diet where we eat the food. Let's just start there and go forward and have the patience to go there. If I'm understanding the two of you correctly.
I think that that's correct. And what I would like to add is that the three elements that I spoke about earlier are what you gain in maximum levels in a green juice: oxygen, hormones, and enzymes.
Okay. And David, let's bring you into the discussion, because I know you talk about juicing all over the place, and you probably talk about juicing a wider variety of material, either than Brian or of course, Doug. And so let's get you into the conversation and hear your thoughts about the use of juicing for regaining health and for one who's healthy.
Juicing is a supplement. That's what juicing is. It's not a replacement for food. It's a way to get additional stuff into your body. Living in a city where everything is acidic, there's acids being poured out of the back of cars, there's acids in the air, sulfur in the air, there's acids in the water, chlorine, acidified food. You need as much alkalinity as you can have. I've found that over a number of years that your ability to retain alkalinity and to store it and hold it in reserve can increase dramatically, where I couldn't, when I first started on live foods, I probably, maybe I'd do like a 4-ounce spinach juice or a 4-ounce, I used to do parsley juice and be just, I'm spacey. Now I could do 64 ounces of green juice and have not have any reaction at all, because my body has learned how to store it quickly, store up those minerals. I'm a strong believer that very strong digestion, and I know in my own case, my digestion went from pretty much average to extremely strong, where I can eat macadamia nuts and watermelon together without any problem whatsoever. People just are shocked by that, and then drink oil after that and do all that. I really think that that's all a result of taking in excessive amounts of alkaline minerals, having them in reserve, excessive amounts of enzymes that you can find in juices, and when you have that going on, your body can digest anything easily. So I'm a big believer in the beginning. Definitely green juices can get the minerals to the cell sites faster than any other way. Even beyond that, the green juices can be used to begin to build alkalinity in the system, because most of us have spent our alkalinity through the basic lifestyle of the modern day.
Okay, let's pursue the juicing thing just in a slightly different way if we could, because this is a big topic for a lot of people. One of the things that I've been taught is that the organs and systems in our body are nourished through use. In other words, the kidney gains its own nourishment through its own function, the liver and so forth. When we juice, one of the advantages that some people talk about is that nutrients are absorbed directly in the stomach without having to go through the rest of the digestive system. It's kind of a rapid process. Now, I don't know, I'm just telling you what some of the press are saying, some of the books are saying, because we want to get some clarity here for people. So if we are consuming juice, are we in fact relying upon a very high up in the digestive system absorption, and are we bypassing some of the digestive system and thereby, in a certain sense, allowing the organs to lie a little dormant? Anybody?
When we juice, we are eliminating the need for a certain type of digestion, which is known as mechanical digestion. Mechanical digestion is done primarily through the teeth and some of the muscular action of the intestinal tract and stomach. There is a problem with eliminating the mechanical digestion that we do in our mouth, because this is the time when the sensors in our mouth tell our brain what's going into our stomach, and gives our brain a chance to tell our stomach and eventually our intestines what to do with that nutrient material. So when you glug down a large quota of juice, sometimes it almost never even hits your taste buds. People just slug it down. This does not digest as well as if they swished each mouthful around in their mouth for a while and really took their time with it, as they would have had they just chewed up vegetables till they were juicy. The absorption happens primarily in two places. Absorptions of nutrients happens primarily in two places. A tiny, tiny bit of nutrients can actually be absorbed under the tongue, whether you're juicing or whether you're chewing. a tiny amount of certain nutrients will be absorbed under the tongue. Sugars, B12, there's a whole array of things that come in under the tongue. Most of the absorption, however, happens in the small intestine, not in the stomach. About the only thing that can be absorbed through the stomach lining is alcohol, which isn't something we're recommending. All right. So
Well, I thought you went off the deep end there for a minute.
I guess we can leave that one out, you know. And are we giving the organs a rest? Well, we are giving certain organs a rest, but we're asking other organs to work harder with this highly concentrated dose of nutrient material. I would say that for whatever organs we're saving or we're sparing, we're certainly taking other organs and not sparing them because we're asking them to work at an accelerated rate. I think the important thing from my perspective on this is that, and I'm again, if I go to a dinner party 4 times a year, someone offers me a glass of juice, I wouldn't say, no, I won't have that like it's plague, but I don't, different from Brian, go day in, day out, never miss my glass of green juice. But I would drink it, and I admit some juices can taste pretty good. I think the thing that most people misunderstand, and I alluded to in the keynote, is that we take our eating habits with us, just like Brian said earlier. If you were an overeater on a standard diet, you're probably an overeater on vegetarian diet. If you were a comfort eater as a vegetarian, you're probably a comfort eater as a raw fooder. We're funny about food. We like to eat when we're alone. We like to eat when we're with people. We like to eat when we're happy. We like to eat when we're sad. We like to eat for almost every reason there is. It's pretty, yeah, it's amazing. But the mentality in America that we have to overcome in many ways because it has become a sickness is the more is better. If it's exercise, we see people who exercise all day long. We tend to think of these people in the sickness of anorexia. We see the sickness of overeating, and we see the sickness of supplementation, of macro supplementation, what's called orthomolecular medicine. It's referred to as a medicine. It has been demonstrated time and time again that if your nutrient need for, say, iron is 10 units a day, and we won't get particular about the numbers, but if it's 10 units a day and you only consume 9, your body is incredibly efficient at taking in those 9. It's going to get almost all of the 9. But if you take in 100 units a day, your body's only going to absorb about 11. And if you take in 1,000 units a day, your body's only going to absorb about 12. What you're training your body to do by taking concentrated doses of nutrients, you're training your body not to absorb nutrients. Rather than providing nutrients in close approximation to the nutrient needs that we have and training your body to absorb what you get in exactly the same way as we've done all week long by getting a suntan and training our body not to be so affected by the sun.
Okay, well, David and Brian have both got the microphones up here. Brian, Brian, why don't you go first?
Doug was really rolling there well till the end.
You got to step out on a limb.
He was talking about, if those of you that read the chapter in my book on chemical supplementation, which well over 90% are today made in laboratories, comparing that to what I would call the pre-digested nutrients from a green juice is like putting, night and day together and saying they both are bright. So I would disagree with that. The body does not, from a pre-digested nutrient, lose its ability to develop the use or the ability to digest nutrients. It's that simple. It actually enhances it. There has never been any scientist who wouldn't tell you the proper way to eat nutritionally is to take juice before you then take a raw salad if you are then going to eat a cooked food. Why? Because it enhances the digestibility. You're putting in a raw juice, even a fruit juice, you're putting in enzymes to your body. And the more enzyme activity you have, the more you spark it. And this is why I'm also a proponent of natural, biologically developed supplementation, food-based supplementation. Why, as Victor has pointed out last night so articulately, is that you, in fact, are developing more ability to enhance the electromagnetic frequency of the cell by taking in these foods. Green juices, enzyme supplementations, algae supplements, the raw algae we're taking here, etc. But we do agree on the first 3/4 of what you said.
David?
And I buy a little of the end.
Okay, we're going to go on then. We're going to switch food groups. We're going to go from juices to grains. Now, grains is another area where there's a lot of question. Should we eat grains? Should we not? How much? Do we soak them? Do we this? Do we sprout them? All these things. So, Brian, at Hippocrates, I know that there's a little bit of grain going on, but maybe not a whole lot, and I haven't really spent that much time analyzing that part of the program. But maybe you'd like to go first and just talk a little bit about grain in the diet of someone who's coming back from an illness, and then longer term, grain for somebody for long-term use.
Well, for people to not understand that Hippocrates believed in grains, you mustn't know that we use wheatgrass, because wheatgrass is a grain. So let's start with that. Kamut grass is a grain. Barley grass is a grain. So the way that we always use grains is by germination. Now, the first work that was done on this was by Dr. Christine Nolfi in Denmark, where she actually was showing us biochemically how when one consumes a grain that you're enhancing nutrient flow in the body. In the recent years, and a lot of my books I write about this, Victoris has reported in his books, there's been significant research studies to back what enhancements occur when you germinate a grain. One small example to you. Across the board, on an average, the nutrients, vitamins, etc., go up by about 8 times. 8 times just by germination. More important than that, the proteins are digested into, or broken down to, to amino acids. The carbohydrates are broken down to simple sugars, and the fats are then broken down to a fatty acid. Taking the energy time, the 2.5 to 3 hours that it would take for the average person to digest a grain away. When you grow it into a grass and then extract and eliminate the pulp from it, it's 15 to 30 minutes that you're getting the benefit of that grain. Again, on the average of 8 times across the board, the nutrients going up. Also including oxygen, enzymes, and hormones at a much greater ratio, because now you've unlocked that. Now, what I tell people about the Institute and why we've had this great success is, I don't know how many of you realize this year we were voted the #1 medical health spa in the world. We beat Duke University, every German institute, every Italian institute. And when I called to ask them why, they said it was long overdue, that your size we thought was insignificant, but your results are more significant than the significant-looking institutions. That was the exact words that they used. So the bottom line for this is, I am a big proponent of grain use for athletic purposes, being used for athletic purposes, but never non-germinated foods. Always germinated.
David?
People have differences in metabolism. We know that. A sprouted grain, this is very important to understand this. If you take a grain and you cook it, what you've done is you've taken the starchy elements in there and converted them into a sugar. So it's more of a starchy carbohydrate, or a quote-unquote complex carbohydrate. If you take that grain and you sprout it, or let's just say you analyze it unsprouted, you're going to find that its dominant element is protein. That's sprouted wheat, sprouted or non-sprouted wheat or barley or any of these. If you sprout them, they even become more proteinaceous. They have a lot of enzymes in the tail. We know that. Some people who have a very protein-based metabolism, I know Karen Calabrese does this, I know Yukta does this, includes a lot of sprouted grains for energy in their diet. That's very unique and rare. For myself, I use basically fat as my primary calorie source, and that's where I get most of my energy from. Other people, probably Dr. Graham included in this group, would use mostly fruit for the caloric density of the food that they're taking in. In terms of a therapeutic value, I think sprouted grains have a lot of therapeutic value, especially in cancer. Because what you're bringing in is a lot of protease, a lot of the protein-splitting enzymes, which is what surrounds cancer cells. And I definitely agree, therapeutically using sprouted grains can be okay, and I definitely am a believer in going to the wild state grains, things like kamut or things that are more in the natural state like rye. Barley even is a little bit too hybridized or crossbred. Generally, wheat, in my opinion, is way too crossbred. And, that's been thousands of years of basically hand manipulation. Let's pick this one because it tastes better. Let's pick this one over thousands of years, and it's not going to be the optimum deal. If we're going to do it, we might as well go for the optimum heirloom seeds and take it from there.
Okay, Doug, you've actually written a book called Grain Damage. So I know you have
like brain damage, but grain damage?
So I know you have a pretty specific set of views about grain that may be a little different than what Brian and David are sharing, and we want to really understand what that view is and what your thinking is behind it.
Sometimes we lose track. Our finger slips off the pulse because of what we're doing, and as far as we're going down our road, we lose track of what mainstream America is consuming, how people live. I go into grocery stores so infrequently, but when I do, it's shock treatment. You look in someone's cart, it is shock treatment. I walk into a grocery store, I turn right, I go to the green section, I get my greens, and I walk out. But if you look into someone else's cart, it is simply an amazement. And we, dealing with what we deal with day in and day out, sometimes forget how far we have come from where we began. So I would begin by saying that I respect both of the answers, but really neither of them dealt with what I perceive of as the question, which had to do with grain consumption. Grain consumption is bread and crackers and pasta and cake and cookies and grains. And I simply have no use in my program for this. There are so many other viable alternatives. This is a new, it's only, depending on who you ask, a 5,000 to 10,000 year experiment, a recent addition into human diet. We have a 2 million year track record of success without the use of grains, or we would not be here. But in the last few thousand years, people have used grains. Now, the difference between grains being the staff of life and the staff of death is simply a matter of how we use them. If in fact, since we know grains are storable, and in case of fire, flood, famine, or drought, there's no food available, we can fall back and survive for a while until the crops come back. For instance, when the hurricanes hit and all the leaves come off the trees and all the fruit come off the trees and there's nothing to eat, well, nice to know that we had some grains in store and we can survive to live another day. But when we start using them day in and day out, they literally, like any other crutch, they cripple us. As far as taking the juice from the sprout of the wheat, if you want to call that grain consumption, okay, but it's a green drink, and if we want to eat a few sprouts now and then as an augmentation to our diet, okay, but uncooked grains, certainly whole grains, and especially the classic oat, wheat, millet, barley, rye, these whole grains have been shown to have certain nutrient deficits that cannot be made up for by the consumption of other foods that have those nutrients. For instance, grains have no vitamin C whatsoever, something that we need on regular doses. And by eating other foods that
Doug,
have
I have
vitamin
to step
C,
in. Grains do have vitamin C.
in the grains themselves, or in the
In the vein.
I look in USRDA charts. They say oat, wheat, barley, rye, 0 vitamin C. So where'd you find it?
Don't go for the USDA anything.
USRDA.
The bottom line is that the majority of grains have vitamin C. There's not a nutrient in the cosmos that doesn't have vitamin C involved in it, because it's one of our elemental factors. Now, it has to have vitamin C in it, even if it's minuscule amounts, because of the fact that that's a bonding agent for the protein, the amino acids.
No question, but
When you germinate the grain, again, it enhances to at minimum 8 times the amount. So then the vitamin C content comes out. So to say it doesn't have it is a misnomer, and I just wanted to clarify that.
It's an insignificantly low amount, I would say, if it is there. Again, USRDA says no, and I understand that when we sprout, we're talking about a different animal than we are when we talk about grains, the way that 99% of the people consume 99.99% of all the grains they consume. So is there a way to make them better yes, but to me it's more of a vodka or beer concept rather than.
He's talking about a lot of booze today. What's going on with this guy?
You know, it's like which is
late at night we go to bed. He's out here at the bar.
People say which is worse, or which is better for me. If I'm going to have chicken or fish, which is better? To me, I just have found that my people thrive better when I just take them off grains, and they thrive just as well without them. Yes, it's a tough mindset to get through because most of us are addicted to complex carbohydrates.
Okay, let's approach the grain subject from a different perspective. David, I'll give you the first one this time. If a person were to choose to consume a diet 100% of fruits and vegetables in what I will simply call a healthy balance in order to set that aside for the moment. In other words, consuming zero grain products, is that person likely to thrive?
Yes, very likely. Again, grains can be used therapeutically if they're sprouted because there's a lot of elements that can be increased, B vitamin content, etc. And I'm sure Brian can teach you all about those elements. In terms of a day-to-day lifestyle, again, it's very rare that someone is going to bring in grains regularly as part of their daily lifestyle. There are people out there who do that, certainly. However, most of the people I know who are 100% raw or pretty close to it, who are thriving on live foods, generally do not include grains in their diet unless it's like holiday food like what we're having here. And we had a great dish last night that Renee made with the sprouted Manitowoc rice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to mention about that rice because, see, that's more of a natural type of grain. I mean, maybe it's not even a true grain, but it's closer to its wild state. When you start crossbreeding these things, whether it's potato or whether it's grain, the stuff gets lazy. It doesn't have to fight for survival anymore. Therefore, it gets a little starchy or glutenaceous. And therefore, when you cook that, then it becomes more sweet. You following that? Mm-hmm. And that's the complex carbohydrate problem that we're dealing with these days. We're dealing with complex carbohydrates in terms of corn products, which is also a grain, complex carbohydrate products made out of wheat, a grain obviously, also potato. Now that's not a grain, but that's another food. These are all very, very crossbred, hybridized foods that are far too sweet, have far too much sucrose in them for the body to even know what to do with.
Brian, how about you? If a person chose, this is an average person, not a real sick person, just for the sake of the question, chose to set up a diet of 100% raw fruits and vegetables in, again, what I will call a healthy mix without addressing what that is, and zero grain, can that person thrive?
That's a very difficult question for me to answer. I mean, if you gave me an extremely healthy person, probably so. But that person's so rare that I don't get to see them in my work. And again, half the people I work with are healthy. So I would assume, I'd like to flip the question. When I wrote with a buddy of mine, the Macrobiotic Whey book, which is one of Cushy's books, because 3.5 decades ago I joined all of this becoming a macrobiotic. The teaching was 60% of your diet should be grain. And from that, the science that came out of Harvard at that time showed us how wrong we were by giving an excessive amount of grains to people. Now, grant you, they were cooked grains, the type that Doug is talking about in his Grain Dead book. But the bottom line is, quite simply, that a lot of grains are also not what you want to do. Even in sprouted form, you don't want to do it. So I would say that for almost everyone that I've ever worked with, a small percentage of grain should be part of your diet. We do not suggest large percentages. And I do concur absolutely with Doug in saying that when you take it and grow it into a grass, it's really not a lot like the original grain. It becomes a mother plant again. And the mother plant's the green vegetable, basically, that's giving seeds away. So this is where you can use larger amounts by weight and in weight of grain without taking the grain that has to go through digestion process, etc.
So just to be clear, that we understand you correctly, if we distinguish between the grain, quote unquote, in the form of the green, and the grain in the form of the seed, if I understand you correctly, the seed form, even germinated, you would suggest in fairly small quantities Absolutely. In the diet. Absolutely. And David, you're agreeing with that. And of course, Doug, you're saying essentially none. So
none for a lot of people, I would say.
Yeah, so we're really not as far apart as some people might picture.
No, not at all. The exception to the rule is now and I understand and honor Doug and his experience with this, is I would put athletes on large amounts, bodybuilders. When I went and wanted to build my muscle mass, I used grains and beans to do it. I could not have done it on fruits.
Doug, you look like you want to re-enter the conversation here. Well, what about the comment that Brian just made about athletes?
Well, yeah, I'll comment on that, but...
I mean, you are an athlete, so you probably have something to contribute here, yeah.
I have plenty of athletes putting on plenty of muscle mass, but it's neither on fruits, grains, fats, vegetables, or anything else. They put on muscle mass by doing hard physical labor. And it doesn't matter what you eat, there is no food that causes you to gain muscle mass. So what you used as your source of fuel, fine. I mean, if that worked, that's fine. But I don't like to... This is a question that comes up a lot in my arena, is what do I eat to get bigger? And there's no food that you can eat that causes you to get bigger. If there was, then all those guys in the gym would be hanging out in kitchens and restaurants instead of in the gyms.
Well, they are. They are. In all due respect to you, Doug, I totally disagree with this. I've been going to gyms now for a quarter of a century. You're certainly much more of an athlete than I'll ever be in my life, and you can tell by that, the way you exercise and your commitment to exercise. But yes, how all of those people become big is through food. Have any of you ever not seen what these people who have incredibly large muscle mass eat in a day? Now, do we concur with the food they eat? The answer is no. But if you picked up Vegetarian Times, I believe from 1988, they did a cover story on vegan bodybuilders. And they had, at that point, the man who hadn't lost a competition in years, a Swede who had lived in California at that point, who had an incredibly large muscle mass. Now, for him to gain that muscle mass on anything other than large, astronomically large amounts of germinated grains, and probably it wasn't germinated grains, so I'm putting words in his mouth. It was probably grains or beans. I will challenge you and say that that would literally be an impossibility. You would have to consume such a massive amount of fruits, or foods, not fruits only. You couldn't do it on fruits. Foods, that it would be literally an impossibility. Now, grant you, look at how much you work out and look at your body size and look at what you're eating. If you were eating grains, which, by the way, why they put weight on your body is they slow down one's metabolism. And when you slow down a metabolism, what happens is that when you rip the muscle, and this is how you develop muscle mass, you rip the muscle and it rebuilds again. And so the metabolism has everything to do with that. So let's have a debate on this one.
Yeah, let's go a little bit. Because I think if I understand you, and folks, I mean, even when we talk, this is with the highest degree of respect, and our differences of opinions is how we're going to learn as well. I think what you're saying is, I'm not big because I don't use the grains or the pulses. And I would respond by saying, I'm not big because I do fantastic amounts of cardio work, and I do everything in my possible nature to not get big. I try every way I can not to get big because I do long-distance events, and being big works against me. What I'm trying to do is stay the size I am, and which I've basically done over the last 20 years, and get stronger and stronger and stronger without getting bigger. This is a trick that I had to teach the U.S. diving team, because as they get stronger, they get bigger. They make a bigger hole in the water and a bigger splash, and they don't look like a Chinaman when he goes in the water and goes, they go in and they look like a cannonball because their shoulders are so huge. And so teaching them how to train in such a way that they didn't get bigger was as much a part of the challenge as any other. And that part I'd like to
And I respect what you say, and I agree. I hope you didn't misunderstand what I said. It's not. You come from a gymnastic background. Now, I teach constantly the two real athletes we have in the world, and the strongest athlete we have in the world is a gymnast. I'm sure he's stronger than men that you see that are 5 times his size. That I'm positive of. There's no question. Look at what he does yogically. Look at what he does lifting his own body weight, and that's real muscle development. And that's what they learned in gymnastics. So please, it wasn't of disrespect. It's of utter respect for you. It's utter respect to you. But what I'm saying is if you happen to add more sprouted grains to your diet, you would have more muscle formation, more muscle development, and still achieve the same exact goals that you're trying to achieve at this point. And when I've worked with Olympic-level athletes, that's what I've tried to do, form muscle mass so that their immunological function develops at a greater degree, because the lymphatic system has everything to do with muscle mass development. And so you want more immune function, and that's what my objective is for healthy or unhealthy people.
Okay, let's give David a chance to jump in here. He's got the microphone up.
One thing I definitely want to say that is certain is that eating cooked grain over a long period of time as an athlete will definitely cause metabolic disorders. That's a fact. That's one thing. Another thing is when we're talking about seeds, even if they're sprouted, we still need to take in. Now, sprouted seeds are obviously more alkaline than non-sprouted seeds. However, they're not alkaline enough to be really considered an alkaline food until they've gone into the green leafy stage. Therefore, if someone's taking in a lot of sprouted seeds that have just been germinated for a couple days, you need to take in a lot of vegetables, green leafy vegetables in particular, to balance off that acid-alkali balance that I referred to in my talk on Monday, in that if you have a lot of seeds, you have to have a lot of leaves to create the acid-alkali balance. Every primitive person in every primitive culture knows that as a rule. Another thing is my partner Stephen Arland in our business Nature's First Law is a very powerful man. He does not eat grains. He can bench press 135 pounds 100 times. That's a very difficult feat to do, extremely difficult. I'd say almost every professional football player cannot do that. And he does that mostly through eating a wide variety of vegetables, vegetable juice, olives as a main source of fat, some nuts, and some avocado. So that's possible, and he's done it, and he's demonstrated that.
Can I ask you his?
Hang on one second.
Yeah.
Doug, since David brought up Steve Arland, let's also, I know, Tim, you're probably in the room, but let's also, because you're very good friends with Tim Trader, and he clearly is somebody who's very powerful.
Can I ask a question, though? Well, how old is your partner?
He's 31.
Okay. Well, there's hormonal differences, so let's preface that. This gentleman and I are the older generation here.
More than that.
Yeah, you are. You're 32. You're 32. Big difference.
I remember 31. No.
But, you know, we have, and you were, Tim, in a sense, Tim's teacher at a time, and he, like Stephen, is a very robust, physique, very strong.
Tim,
in terms
you
of muscle. You want to come up, Tim, for a minute?
Hey, here he comes. Give him a hand.
I knew Dr. Timothy Trader.
Hey, this is Dr. Timothy Trader from Florida.
I met Timothy Trader 10 years ago. He was a 99-pound weakling. No, he really wasn't. he wasn't. But he was nothing like this. He's put on a ton. How many pounds of muscle mass? Any idea?
Take the mic.
Right now, I'm about 6 or 7% body fat. I weigh 150 pounds. Do the math.
So, Tim, if you stay with us for a second, do you use any grains in your diet in any form?
No, I don't. I find that I don't need too much in that order. I need to have the energy and the stuff that does it. That's fruit to me. I do some nuts, seeds, avocados, just like Stephen. And
David.
no, we're talking about his partner.
Oh, yeah.
But you know what? These guys are pretty rawsome themselves.
Rawsome, that's good.
Okay, now hang on here for just a second.
Yeah.
Brian, a few minutes ago when you were talking about grains, one of the things you said, you kind of slipped by, was it slows your metabolism, and then you went on with the rest of that comment. Is it fair to say that which slows your metabolism requires more digestive effort and more energy in digestion, and therefore, in another sense, might be energy diminishing?
No, in the case of a germinated grain, even though it slows one's metabolism, because of the carbohydrates that break down to simple sugar, it enhances the energy flow by about 18 to 28 times. So you're actually gaining 18 to 28 times more energy because of the simple sugar compounds that come from the germinated. Now, if you go back and speak about the grain that's cooked, you're in big trouble, because you no longer have the enzymatic factors to make that digestible.
Okay, Tim, well, I want to give it back to Tim for just one second, because you're really a bodybuilder in your own way. And what would be your response to what Brian is saying about the grain and the digestive process? I'm sure you've experimented and tried different things along the way in your diet.
Of course, experimentation is a lifelong process, and we all have to do that, right? We have to find out what works for us, and what these gentlemen up here are really saying is, this is what I've seen, this is the research that's behind this. For me, cooked foods take too much out, period. I don't care if they're grains, I don't care if they're meat, whatever. It's hard to operate. But when you get down to the sprouted grains, Sure, gluten levels go way down. The fiber itself changes from insoluble to more towards the soluble side. Am I right?
Yes,
Okay.
you're doing good.
But they don't. Sure, I mean, how many of us have tried raw pizza using sprouted wheat berries, huh? It's super, but I find that it takes too much energy out of my system and causes too much problems for me that I can't operate the next day like I could before. And for me, I have to operate at a very great pace to take care of me and to take care of others. I'm not just taking care of me. I've got to take and partner with the people they call patients and take care of them as well as a partner. So the grains slow me down. I can't afford to be slowed down.
Great. Doug, you wrote a book on the subject. Let's give you the last word. But first, let's recognize Dr. Tim Trader.
Dr. Tim Trader.
Hey.